Hello everyone, today I'm joined by Dave Michels from TalkingPointz and we're going to be delving into the latest TalkingPointz Insider Report, and I've got one right here. Welcome Dave, how's it going?
Good. Good to see you, Rob.
Good to see you, and I'm surprised I see you in between all these events you've been going to recently. Dave, any kind of
Mister,
particular
I'm a
highlights?
European like yourself. I managed to pull off 4 European events in June. So this is the
Wow.
place to be.
Well, I know it felt like the industry went a little bit quiet, across June, which was unusual. There's a lot of events at the moment, a lot of vendor events and vendor neutral events. But yeah, as we record this, Infocom's just finished, and that was a huge event, and the UC Today team covered this year. So anyway, I mean, there's so much news around. Let's jump into today's news. But just before we do, we are going through your TalkingPointz Insider Report, Dave. So just
The,
very quickly.
the May, it's always a little confusing. The May Insider Report comes out the first week of June because it recaps what happened in May. And so it's an analysis of May. And the June Insider Report will come out the first week of July. And so Infocom is in the June report. So that hasn't come out yet.
Cool. Well, there's
But you're right,
still.
though. That was a crazy conference. People think, oh, video's all done. The pandemic kind of, my teams won. That the whole meeting space is just exploding. There's so much
Yeah.
innovation going on in meetings right now. But that will be next month's Insider Report.
Okay, well, let's look at some of these other headlines for now, because there's still plenty to go, dive into. First of all, which one that jumped out at me first in the report this month was Amazon Alexa getting an upgrade with generative AI. Now, I know it's not quite within the UC space, but I really think this is relevant and interesting. Dave, why was that featured in your report?
Well, pretty much the whole industry right now is obsessed with AI and specifically generative AI. And so it's interesting to see what's going on. And we're in this really strange time. I say, the way I've been explaining it to people is there's three kinds of AI right now. There's generative AI, which is, everyone's excited about, and it's been hogging headlines for almost 2 years now. And then there's everything before that, which I'm just calling legacy AI. It's just easier to call it that way. Legacy AI, generative AI. And then there's the third kind, which is the future of AI, or the next AI. And so we're in this weird spot right now where everyone's excited about generative AI, but not about the current generative AI. The current generative AI represents this new methodology, large language models, totally unlocking different kinds of capabilities, and people are really excited about that. But the current generative AI has got some issues, and so we're really betting on the future AI. And so you're stuck, because if you're a company like Amazon and you've got this Lex investment, or maybe you're a company like Apple and you've got the Siri investment, do you keep on working on legacy AI, which actually works really well and works great, but is kind of the end of the maturity line? Or do you go to generative AI, which doesn't work very well, it has all kinds of issues, but is pretty exciting about where it might go? And so you've got companies like this Amazon story saying, okay, we're gonna out with the old, in with the new, we're gonna make Lex focus on generative AI and hold on. And it's going to be a little crazy. We just saw another example of this actually with Apple, and they introduced what they call it, the Apple Intelligence, their version of AI. And it's the same thing. They're going to slow roll this stuff out because generative AI doesn't really work very well. It has lots of issues. And so they're like, okay, we're going to go to the future, not the present. And the present just happens to be where we are right now. So it's kind of this weird tightrope.
It is indeed. I mean, so much happening in that space, but we could go on all day, couldn't we? Let's go from the future, opening up, new Alexa-based assistants, generative AI, to actually shutting down some of these old services. And recently, ICQ was shut down. What is the state of messaging nowadays, Dave?
Yeah, so ICQ was the first mainstream, in terms of adoption, internet chat protocol, and Before that was IRC, but you really had to be a nerd to be into IRC. But ICQ was the one that AOL adopted. If you remember America Online, and they called it AOL Instant Messenger or AIM.
I remember, yeah.
And it really took off. And I know I had an AIM client for years, and that was fantastic. And that was really the first part of messaging when messaging went mainstream. Since then, it's all been replaced. Microsoft Teams, Slack. Almost every other UCAS team chat mechanism, Zoom, has their own little solution. But what was interesting is that ICQ is actually going to be shut down June 25th. Maybe it's June 24th. Right around one of those days, it's going to shut down. The sad part of that story is not that many people will notice. It was such an important pioneering technology, but it's going away. It's coming to an end. That's actually the good thing. It's coming to an end. Most things don't ever go away. People are still faxing. People are still doing rotary phones. I mean, most things in telecom never go away. So it's nice to see something go away, something we don't have to keep on supporting, but not that many people will notice. But I want to highlight here that interoperability in messaging is both a feature and a liability. And so it's a feature because it doesn't work very well, interoperability. It doesn't work very well. And that means that when you go to your chat, your team chat, you probably don't have a lot of spam because only people that you know can kind of communicate with you. And people like that. But the fact that it's not interoperable is a problem if you're working with people who are different companies and whatnot. And there's some ways to do that. And there's companies like Neo, M.io. But interoperability is this weird thing in messaging. People want it in video. In messaging, they can't quite decide whether they want it or not. And so, luckily, we have a few choices.
I think that's a really interesting one to take away. I'm going to think about maybe running a poll on UC Today's channel to see if we can just kind of test or gauge the appetite for interrupt between messaging platforms.
I would love to see that. I think that'd be really interesting.
It hasn't gone away, that issue, has it? But and certainly not been solved. Next up on the news list that I picked out, Dave, which was really interesting because I don't know much about it, and it's the Project it's Google partners up for Project Starline. Well, who have they partnered up with, and what is Project Starline?
So Starline came out at Google Labs, I think it was 2021, and it was ridiculous. It was it was a booth. It was for face-to-face meetings, and it was attempting to be, you would sit in a booth facing a big, large screen, 65-inch screen, and having a life-size, as realistic conversation you could possibly have with a remote person. And the other person had to have a booth as well. And it was a concept. It wasn't a product. They were showing it off. And it was a ridiculous concept because they went over the top. They had all these cameras, 3D cameras, sensors. It was just no way to commercialize this. And so it was like, hey, look what we're experimenting with in our labs. And it was important because Cisco, Microsoft, Zoom, they have hardware, they have ecosystems, and Google has a pretty limited selection there. So Google was showing what it can do. The next time we saw Starline was in 23. And it reappeared, and it was simpler and smaller, and obviously getting closer to being commercialized. Not that interesting, but it was again that booth concept face to face. The problem with the booth concept is it doesn't work when you have multiple parties or either multiple people, or multiple companies or groups on one call. It doesn't scale very well, but it works great for one-to-one meetings, maybe a job interview or something like that. But so 24 pops up again, and they've announced that they're going to just turn the whole thing over to HP. Presumably, it's HP Poly. They're the people that know what's really going on with video. Wasn't really clear. But Google does need stronger hardware vendors. They have, they started off with Chromium. They were the last major vendor to adopt the Android solutions, which is kind of funny since Androids came from Google. But even Microsoft adopted Android before Google did. And so their ecosystem is really much smaller and weaker than Microsoft, Cisco, and Zoom. And so this might be a way to jumpstart that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I'm going to try and put a couple of links in the description to this one just to find out a little bit more about Project Starline and the latest news announcement. So next up, another one that caught my eye was Zoom making a quantum leap into end-to-end encryption. Tell us more on that one.
Yeah, so first off, great for Zoom, and Zoom was laughed at and ridiculed for having the worst security 3 or 4 years ago, right around the pre-pandemic, and now they've really clamped down. So let's celebrate that. But I thought this was a little over the top because they came up or they improved their end-to-end encryption, and they added this will be safe with quantum computing. Now, no one really. I mean, it's kind of a strange guarantee. It's kind of like saying, this technology will work fine even if aliens attack us or something. It's hard to imagine where quantum computing is going to take us. Nobody really understands it. I shouldn't say nobody. Most of us don't understand it. There's a lot of concern that quantum computing might completely break crypto coins, or any kind of cryptography. But people that are in cryptography and people that are in quantum computing say that it won't. And, all we can do is listen to these pros because most of us aren't these pros. And so Zoom claiming that their new end encryption is quantum safe seems a bit silly to me, but then, why not? If they're experts and they've looked at it, it's a bold claim, probably unenforceable. I'm not sure you'll get your money back if somebody cracks it with a quantum computer, but no quantum computers are on the horizon of doing that right now, so why not make the claim? Go for it.
Like it. Good. Well, next up, another one that is quite interesting around, I suppose, you titled it kind of No More Max UC, but for anyone out there who doesn't know what Max UC is, tell us a little bit about this story, because this is quite interesting between, I suppose it's the acquisition of MetaSwitch by Microsoft 5 years on, isn't it? But
it's actually, I consider this story really the end of perpetual licensing models, and it's kind of a funny term because the end of perpetual doesn't make any sense. But the issue here is that the first generation of VoIP was largely there were three big companies. They were acquisitive companies, so it was more than that. But three big companies. It was BroadSoft, it was MetaSwitch, and it was GenMan, which is now part of Ribbon. And they all had this perpetual model. So the service providers would buy this soft switch and buy their licenses once and then sell it as many times as they could, as long as they could, etc. And that seemed to be a good business model, we thought. But it turned out that it wasn't, because the over-the-top vendors, RingCentral, Teams, 8x8, all these companies, they had a recurring revenue model. They kept on charging every month for these seats. And that allowed them to get more revenue, which allowed them to out-innovate these guys. And a lot of these perpetual licensing guys found themselves in trouble, which is why they all got acquired. And so Microsoft acquired MetaSwitch a few years ago. People were expecting, that Microsoft was going after the technology, not necessarily that business model. And we got confirmation of that in May when Microsoft basically is shutting down that whole business and telling all the service providers we're end-of-lifing the product, I should say end of sales of the product, which probably means end of support will come after that. The MetaSwitch site, even though they were acquired years ago, is still up, metaswitch.com. They claim on their site that they have 750 service providers. So this is a big problem for 750 service providers or less that now need to figure out what to do about their MetaSwitch investments. A number of companies, the next generation, are circling like vultures. Allianz is one of them. Intermedia, we just did an interview with Michael Gold from Intermedia on UC Today. Crescendo is a company that's targeting these service providers. UMA, a company out here in Europe, in Reach, and of course Cisco, who acquired BroadSoft, kind of neglected that business for the first part of that acquisition, but then rediscovered it and is investing in it again. So all these companies are saying, "Hey, we're here, and we want to win that business, and we want the service providers to come to us." Personally, I think, and what I wrote in that section, is I think the pendulum's going to swing back to service providers, local service providers. Right now, it's swung extremely the other way toward over the top, like Microsoft Teams. But there's this widespread thought that UCaaS is mature and a commodity. And so you can't have it both ways. If it's a commodity, then it's not really, the product. I don't care about Microsoft Teams, whatever. I care about the service. I care about the price. And that's where I'm going to buy it from. And service providers might be able to do nice bundles. So I think that pendulum might swing back the other way. Or it's not going to be a commodity, and we're going to say that products like Microsoft Teams are superior, but that jury is still out. And so right now there's a pretty strong consensus that UCaaS is a commodity. So I think that's going to favor the service providers.
Interesting. We'll see how that plays out. I picked out a couple of CX nuggets from your Insider Report, Dave. Just want to jump onto the first one around Microsoft ACS. We don't hear a lot about it in the news, but it's there and it's really starting to kind of take hold in the CX space. Tell us more on that one.
It's what we call a developing story, right, Rob? Because
I like it.
More announcements this month with Microsoft announcing the new CCaaS solution. But in May, the story was basically Microsoft just keeps on. They say America is inching toward the metric system, and I think Microsoft is inching toward a contact center, and I think that we started off with partnerships. They were partnering with a lot of CCaaS providers to integrate with Teams, and then they launched their own Dynamics Digital Contact Center. In March, they announced Qs, their own kind of elaborate hunt group capability. They announced their own digital. Their own digital contact center. Then this month, which came after the newsletter, they announced basically they've upgraded their digital contact center with Copilot. So the story is progressing and they're moving along. In month, what was really interesting to me was that they were targeting or positioning ACS, Azure Communication Services, as the gateway to Teams and Dynamics. So they're basically making an on-ramp for other CCaaS providers to integrate their solutions to Teams, integrate the solutions to Dynamics. They've introduced a bunch of new features in Dynamics, like content sharing and using PowerPoint, using SharePoint. So they're making ACS kind of a gateway solution, an on-ramp to accelerate their migration into contact center and making it easier for companies to integrate into the Microsoft stack. So I think we know where the story is going, and I imagine there'll be another announcement next month, and another. It's just going to keep on getting a stronger and stronger value proposition.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've certainly seen a lot more with the recent unbundling of their contact center solution, their CCaaS solution. It's it's going to get interesting in that Microsoft Teams or Microsoft ecosystem for comms. So good stuff. Okay, last but not least, Dave, just wanted to touch on a slightly curious mention around Cognigy's AI agents, and they might not be what you think they are. So, David, reveal what.
The problem here. This is only a problem for people in enterprise comms. Everybody else gets this, but in enterprise comms, for the past 50 years, we've had a very clear definition of an agent. We know what an agent is, and if you look in the advertisements, it's a beautiful young woman wearing a headset. But that is one definition of an agent. But if you actually look up the definition of an agent, it's basically something that helps you. And Cognigy is talking about AI agents. And again, this doesn't confuse anyone else, but in enterprise comms, we hear the word agent and we think human. An AI agent is not a human, but it is something to assist you. And we normally think of agents or AI around self-service bots or agent assist, things like that. But the idea of using an AI agent to go off and do something for you, maybe to schedule an appointment for you, maybe book an air ticket for you, or book a restaurant reservation, things like
Is that
that.
not an assistant? Is that not what we're calling assistants nowadays? Because
Yeah, but we think of
like
assistants like you're right, but like Siri or Google Assistant, happy to remind you what your cookies are done in the oven, but they don't really set them off to go off and do tasks for you yet. And so the proper term really is, I mean, assistant's a fine term, but AI agent is this concept that AI is, we're going to have these bots that go off and do things for us, which I'm looking forward to. And Cognigy, who's in the CX space and works with a lot of contact center vendors, has now announced that they have AI agents that work specifically within sales and marketing. So it could help you do outbound tasks such as contract renewals or prompt customers to schedule appointments and things like that. We've seen stuff, maybe your car is due for service, maybe your car will call you, maybe the dealership will call you, but it might be an automated solution that calls you and says, hey, can we schedule your car service? So we're going to see a lot more of this outbound stuff starting to happen, and Cognigy is one of the first actually in our contact center space that is introducing that as a feature.
Yeah, I like that. We're seeing a lot more from Cognigy. I know have they just got a round of funding or investment, Dave? Is
They
that
just
right?
did raise some funding. That's right. That's
Yeah.
in the I think that's in the June newsletter. Maybe it was in May. They get a little blurry sometimes, but yeah, they actually just raised, I think it was 100 million. And part of me says, it's not hard for an AI company to raise money right now, but on the other part, there's a lot of AI companies that can't, and so they're doing a lot of things right at Cognigy. They've got a lot. They announced a new partnership with NICE. Now they have partnerships with NICE, Avaya, and 8x8. Those are fully integrated, and then they also have a lot of customers that aren't integrated that are using the stuff. So they've really made a good headway into the contact center.
Yeah, it's really interesting what they're doing there. And I'm just going to finish with saying that, I'm going to predict that, maybe there's a time in the future where if we get a call from a bot, an AI-enabled agent, and it's trying to book me in for a car service, I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to present my bot to take to handle the inquiry, because there's nothing worse than speaking to a chat bot, is there? Or even an IVR on a call and trying to book something in, and it's rather frustrating, blah blah blah, and doesn't always work. But actually being able to offer up my own AI assistant or agent would be quite cool to get something done. So yeah.
So the interesting thing with that is that in the past, that we've always liked that idea of you have your bot call my bot and they'll work it out. In the past, the problem has been, how do you get these bots to integrate? How do we get the APIs and agree and all this stuff? In the present, it's English. We'll just use spoken language, and that seems to work. And so that means any bot can talk to any bot, which is kind of exciting.
That you're right, and that's a really interesting takeaway, isn't it? That's the new interop potentially, isn't it, for a lot of these.
The new and the old interop.
Yeah, exactly. Bring back voice, long live voice. Anyways, Dave, as part of your Insider Reports, always a great section to read is the Good Read section. Some curated news from around the globe. Thought I'd pick out a couple. The first one was an interesting story around Microsoft's biggest renewable energy deal. And I know energy is a big deal right now for AI companies. So, why did you pick that one out?
It's really interesting what's happening, because it's multiple stories, colliding here. And so as you pointed out, all the AI companies right now, all the big AI companies like Microsoft, Meta, and Google, they're all worried about where they're going to get enough power. They see where we are on this graph, and they see that graph going up and up, and we're going to need more and more power. And there's this big, massive rush to expand power generation and data centers, and it's hard. There's not that many places. I mean, we've been building data centers in Virginia for the last 5-10 years, and we're running out of spaces in data center, and Virginia's running out of power. So now they're putting them in other states in the U.S., and they're finding that the infrastructure is not as good, and it's creating other problems. They're moving to other countries. Ireland has banned new data centers. It's like, we've got enough. We don't have enough infrastructure to power all this stuff. And so now these companies are trying to figure out where they're going to get power from, and they're making some really interesting decisions. They're investing in nuclear. They're looking at renewable energies. They're doing all kinds of stuff, because the other story is that most of these software companies have made major commitments toward net zero or reducing their emissions, at a minimum reducing their emissions. Some of them, like Microsoft, have made a commitment toward net zero. So how do you dramatically increase your power and reduce your emissions, which was a promise made before generative AI? And how do you make these things come together? So this particular deal was a renewable energy deal. It's the biggest deal I think we've ever seen like this, and it's coming from Microsoft. And so, yeah, it's just this intersection of lots of different trends coming together, and it's going to be a recurring theme.
Yeah, well worth a read. And last but not least, slightly off piece, I suppose, but certainly connected in with the AI conversation, Google's quest to reinvent search with generative AI. There was a really interesting story there, Dave. Tell us more on that one.
Well, what's really interesting here, as I mentioned earlier, generative AI doesn't really work very well right now, and so it's really hard to put generative AI on external-facing applications. So internal things like Copilot, helping your employees be more productive, helping your agents be more productive with Agent Assist. These things are great. Summarization, internal processes, fantastic. But having your generative AI solutions facing customers is a bit of a tricky thing right now because generative AI tends to get things wrong every once in a while. And so Google's trying to figure out how to reinvent search with large language models. And how do you test something like search that needs millions of searches to figure out how reliable it is? So they put it out in a limited group for millions of inquiries. And sure enough, it caused trouble. It told people if you want to keep your cheese on your pizza, you should glue it on your pizza. And told people to eat rocks. It did all this terrible stuff because that's what generative AI does. And so Google's made fun of, it's like, what are you doing putting this out in the public and telling people to put glue on their pizza? And Google's like, this is the way you make the sausage. And the main takeaway here is that enterprises that are looking at doing this with generative AI, they don't have control over the training data. Now, it turns out that what happened in this particular story with the glue on the pizza was that Google used some content from The Onion. Jeff Lawson at Twilio now running The Onion. The Onion published something about gluing or eating rocks. I don't know which one it was, but somehow that got into the Google the training data and ended up as advice. And so enterprises don't have control over this training data, and therefore don't have really control over what these things might do to their customers or say to their customers. And so it's just signs of the time. This is where we are, and enterprises need to be wary about putting generative AI out because there's lots of issues with this right now. And so we're in that weird spot between legacy AI and the future where we're just not quite right yet, but we'll get better. Now, you've covered a lot of stuff, and I know we're kind of going long on this video, but one thing you didn't cover is that particular issue had a whole 3 pages of financial stuff, and that came from a new contributor, Dimitri Nettis at Benchmark Capital. And he's agreed to do that in the Insider Report quarterly. And so I think that the Insider Report now is the only report that has kind of an industry insights and financial insights on a quarterly basis. And I think that, I don't know how much you got out of that section, but he goes into individual company results. And I can't do that. I don't have that financial nose like he does. And so I was really excited that he agreed to do that quarterly.
Well, what we should do, Dave, we should invite him on for a show one time and really kind of dig deep into some of those financial results, because we don't cover a lot of financial results in depth at UC Today, but it's always interesting to kind of get that perspective of, well, how is the market performing? How are vendors doing?
It is so confusing, Rob. I cannot figure it out. I've told this to Dimitri. I've said I'm not ashamed of this. I'll listen to a quarterly report, financial results. They do the quarterly results, whatever company, and they go through all their stuff, and I'll listen to it, and I have no idea at the end if the stock is going to go up or down. It's like, hey, we exceeded expectations. Yeah. We blew away the revenue numbers. We're growing, and the stock goes down. It's like, why does that happen? And these financial guys go, oh, it's because of this. It's like, how do you figure this stuff out? I don't get it. And so, it's a whole different way of looking at these companies than the way I look at them. So it's exciting that he's contributing on that on a quarterly basis, because he does understand how to read those leaves. I don't.
Good stuff. Well, it is an interesting section. It's fully in depth. So, yeah, have a look at that. Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. Dave, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Love talking about it. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone for watching. If you've got some good takeaways, which I'm sure you have today, because there's some great things in today's session, do give us a quick mention on social and connect with Dave and myself on LinkedIn. And our links are, of course, in the description below. I'm Rob Scott from UC Today. Thanks for watching.